Hey, you then welcome to my introduction part of Excel VBA. In this tutorial, I'm going to share with you how you can create tools or maybe automate your work using the power of Excel VBA. In this video, I'm not going to introduce VBA to you in a typical way like getting to know what Excel is, what variable are, what are the different types of VBA conditions, and so on. We will learn all those parts and functions while we are using them in creating different tools. In this example, we have a workbook that have two worksheets named inventory and orders. And what we want to do in here is to look up the unit cost of an item on this order tab from the inventory tab using the item name. And I know, yes, I know we can easily achieve that using the Excel VLookUp function, but again, we want to achieve the same result using VBA. I will put a link in the description of this video if you want to download this file so that you can follow the coding with me. So to get started, let's save our workbook first as macro enabled. And to do that, you just need to click a file and save as, and then look for a folder where would you like to save this file. And I will save that to my other drive and I will store that in here. And now we can name this file. I will name it 001 because this is my first VBA video tutorial. I'm planning to create a series, so this will be the first one. And while we are progressing in this tutorial, you will be learning advanced and more functionalities that we can do using Excel VBA. So let's name this file um, VBA VLookUp because it's like we're trying to convert the VLOOKUP function using VBA. And then the save as type should be macro enabled. So that is required for the macro to work. So now let's save it. And now it's an XLSM file already. We can also check that if we go to that folder and if you look at the type, it says macro enabled um, worksheet. And if you look on the file name or file extension of this file, you will notice that it's .xlsm. All right, now let's open our VBA editor, and there are two ways to do that. So the first one is by activating your developer tab. If you don't see this available on your menu, you can just go to file and then options, and then once this window show up, go to customize ribbon and make sure that the developer option is checked in here. So that's the first option that you can use. When you are on the developer menu, you just need to click this visual basic button in order to show the VBA editor. The other option is by pressing Alt F11 from your keyboard. So I recommend using that shortcut key to show the VBA editor. Okay, and here in our VBA editor in the left pane, you will see the structure of our file, which has two worksheets and, and a workbook. And you can code on any of these parts. However, I don't recommend coding from here unless needed. I recommend using a module instead. Now to add a module on our project, you can just right click from here and then select Insert and Module. And before we start writing any code, it is advisable to name your module first so you can easily identify it. So in this case, I will name this VBA VLOOKUP so that if I go back to this code, I can easily identify that this module is for the VBA lookup functionality. Now let's start decoding by creating a sub procedure. And when creating a procedure, it always starts with a sub keyword. And let's name it based on its function. So let's say do b lookup. You can give it any name that you want as long as it is valid, but again, it is recommended that the name is related to this function. So this procedure is similar to Excel functions like VLOOKUP, count, and so on. And when you call this procedure, it will execute the code inside of it. And at this moment, we don't have anything on our procedure if we call it. Let's start the code by creating variables that will represent our two worksheets, which are inventory in order. So to do that, let's start with the keyword dim, and then let's name the first variable inventory sheet as worksheets, and then the other one is order sheet as worksheet. So this is how we declare a variable. You need a variable name and then the variable type. In this case, we are using the worksheet variable type. Now let's set those variable to our worksheet. And to do that, we'll use the keyword set. So let's start with the inventory variable. It should be equals to this workbook, the sheets, and then the name of the worksheet, which is inventory. And then the other one is order sheet is equals to this workbook, the sheets, and then the name of the worksheet. So we only use set when dealing with object variable type, which in this case is worksheet. So, but if you are using variable like integer, string, and boolean, you can just easily set them without using the set keyword. Actually, we can also declare and set a variable that represents our workbook. And to do that, let's create that as a first variable. Let's name it TB as workbook, and then we should set it here like set TB is equals to this workbook. And then instead of mentioning this workbook here, we can just replace it with the variable TB because that represents our workbook. And remember that the other purpose of using variable is to shorten our code, which I will explain later. Now the next step that we will do is get the last item row. So once we create loop, we will know when it should stop. I mean, in this order list, what we need to do is to get or to know what is the last row with a value or what is the last item row. So let's start by declaring a variable that will hold our last row value. So let's say dim order last row as integer. And to get the last row of a specific column, the code is, let's start with a variable. So the code is you need to identify the worksheet first. So in this case, we are using order sheet because that's the current worksheet that we are working right now. And then let's say that range, and the column where we would like to get the last row is column B. So we will put here letter B, and then rows that count followed by end xlap xlap that row. So this is the code for you to get the last row of a specific column in a worksheet. So before we proceed to the next part, let's test this last row code first if it is working. If I just simply run this, I will not know what happened. Now I want to introduce you the immediate window. So this is our immediate window. If you don't have that open yet, you can just simply press Ctrl G from your keyboard, and then you can also use this view menu in here and then select immediate window. In our case, what we can do is to use the code debug.print so that we will be able to see in our immediate window what is the last row if we print the variable order last row. Okay, now we can test this. And you can see in our immediate window, it provides an output which is 21 because the last row in our column B with item is 21. In Excel VBA, you can also monitor your variables during runtime using the F8 key or debug. Just press F8 like this and hover your mouse cursor to the variable that you want to inspect. So here, as you can see, when I hover my mouse cursor in the variable order last row, I can see what's the value of this variable. And now we can also utilize these immediate windows while we are on the runtime. Like for example, I want to know what is the worksheet name of the variable inventory sheet. We can do that using a question mark first, and then let's say inventory sheet that name. And we can see here that the name of that worksheet is inventory. And we can also, I believe we can also check the other properties of this workbook. So here you can see the available properties that we can use. I think we can use the file or pool name. Let's try this pool name. And you can see here when you use that pool name, it shows us the complete path where this Excel macro is saved. Alright, now that we already know our last row item, we can next create a for loop that will process all our item in the list. So for loop always require two parts, the start and the end of loop. For the start, we can use a counter variable name a like this. And then we need to set its initial value. And in this case, it should be equals to 2 because our first item on the list starts at row 2. And then let's use the last row item or variable for the loop ending. So we should write it like this and then next A. Now inside our loop, let's declare a variable that will holds our item name based on the loop counter. So let's name it item name or order item name as string. And now let's assign the value of our current for loop to our order item name variable. So we can do that by typing order item name is equals to order sheet, which is our worksheet, and that range. And since the items are currently or the items are listed in column view, let's say B and A. So whatever the value of our counter variable, that value. Alright, so before we proceed on this code, let's test first this for loop and let's see how this works. So I will remove first the value of our immediate window. We will be using F8 to debug this code, so make sure that you have your cursor somewhere here inside the procedure. And now, okay, we printed the last row. I will delete that later. Now we will be looping starting from A, which is 2, because our item starts at column or row 2, and then our loop will only run until the last row, which is row number 21. So on the first loop, we'll see that the order item name is now equals to pencil because that's the first item on the list. And when if we keep on pressing F8, it will go on to the other item from the list until it reach the row number 21. So that is how our for loop works. So the next step is to create another for loop that will go through the inventory lists, which is the stub. And in this case, we will create a new counter variable because it can't be the same on the parent for loop counter variable. So in this case, let's name it B. So the initial value should be equals to 2 as well because the first item in our inventory tab is starting at row number 2. And then we can directly code it to get the last row on this call in this worksheet. So to do that, let's say inventory sheet that range, and we want to reference column A because it contains the item. Let's say A, and rows that count, that end, that XLAP, that row, and then next B. Right. So you might get confused why we do it this way in here, not we do it this way in here. Well, actually, we can also declare a variable for this one so that we don't need to write it this way. So we can go back from here. We can say, we can declare this variable dim inventory last row as integer. And then let's just copy this. And let's say here inventory last row is equals to that. And now we can replace this line with inventory last row. Alright, now we have the for loop for the inventory tab. The next thing that we need to do in here is to declare two variables. So one for the item name, let's name it inventory item name, a string, and then the other one is the inventory unit cost, a string. Right now, let's set the value of this variable based on the current loop counter. And to do that, let's say inventory item name is equals to, now we are working on the inventory worksheet. So let's say inventory sheet that range A because our item name is in column A and should be depending on the value of our counter variable, which is B. Let's say that value. And then the other one is inventory unit cost is equals to, again, inventory sheet that range, and unit cost is in column B, so we type here B, and the counter variable, which is also B. All right, now inside the loop we can add a condition to check if the item name from the order tab, which is this, matches the item name on the inventory tab, which is this one. If it's equal, we can capture the value of the unit cost, which we store in the variable inventory unit cost. And then the next step is to put the value of this variable into the unit cost column of the order worksheet. Okay, so to do that, let's have an if condition. So let's say if order item name is equals to inventory item name, then what we're gonna do is we need to put here the value of the variable inventory unit cost. So to do that, we will go back to the order sheet variable because that's where the column is, that range, and unit cost column is letter D, and then and then we need to use the counter variable for the parent for loop, which is A, and let's save that value in here. Now we set it to the value of our variable inventory unit cost. And after that, so once the condition is met, we should already exit this inventory loop and process the next item from the order tab. So to do that, we'll just need to put or use exit 4 in here. And after that, the code will proceed on the next item from the order tab and again look for that item unit cost from the inventory tab. Okay, now let's test this. I will be using F8 so that we'll see in action what is happening while we are running this code. So let's press F8 from your keyboard, and then here we set our last row for the order tab as well as on the inventory tab, and we print the order last row of the order tab, which is 21. Now we start the loop from the order list, and the first order item name that we have in here is pencil. So we're going to go to the inside loop now, or to the next loop that will look for the item name from the inventory tab. So on the inventory tab, the first inventory name is also named pencil, and if we check if it matched the order item name, it goes inside this condition, and now we will put the value of the unit cost into the unit cost column of our item pencil, and as you can see in here. So now I'm going to just keep on pressing F8 and let the code run, and we are now looking for item name binder, and it's pencils, it did not match. Now it's binder, so it should match, and then put the inventory cost on the binder. Okay, I will now continue this using F5 or by clicking this button. And now you can see on our order tab that we have now all the unit costs populated. So now that we already have what we need in order to create a lookup function, it is also helpful if we add a message box once all the items have been processed, so we can be notified that the program is completed and we can check the result. So to do that, or to create a message box, we just need to simply type message box, and then let's say this is the very basic notification process completed, or we can also say lookup VBA lookup completed, and then let's add an icon to our message box. Let's say BB information and a button, and it should be BB okay only. And then let's also put a title to our message box. Let's name it VBA 001. And that is our message box. Okay, now let's discuss how you can run your code. The easiest way is by using F5 or by clicking this button, but that option is only applicable if you are a developer of the tool. So what if you want to send this to another user who will also use it for their task? So that would require an easy way for them to run your function. The next option is, if you're here on the worksheet, you can use Alt F8 from your keyboard, and once you press that key, it will show you all the available procedure inside the tool. So in this case, we only have one procedure, which is named do VLookUp. So you can use this, or you can tell the other user to press Alt F8 from their keyboard and then select do VLookUp function. But still, it's still hard, especially if you already have multiple available procedure in here, and you will still require the user to choose from those lists. So the best option is using a button. I recommend using Excel shape instead of ActiveX control. Aside from the looks and feel of shapes, I also found it safer to use compared to the ActiveX control. So to add a button, you just need to simply go to Insert tab, go to Shape, and look for any shape that you would like. The most common is this shape, and then we can, for example, put that in here, and then we can name this Lookup Unit Cost, and then we can change the looks of this button. So it depends on your prepared or how do you want to look. And then I think this is enough. And now to map your code or your procedure to this code, we just need to simply right click from this button and then assign macro, and then look for the do VLookUp, and hit OK. So now I will try to remove this value first, and we will try to click this button and let's see what will. Okay, now we have the unit cost immediately. Once we run the code, and we also have this message box saying that the VBA lookup or lookup, I should change that, is already completed. And that's all for this tutorial. I hope that you learned something from it. I know there are advanced functions that we use already, but you will get used to it as we move to other tutorial videos. So make sure to stay tuned on this series of VBA, and I will make sure that you will probably learn something and you will be able to develop different tools and even help yourself with your work after you completed all this video. And just to summarize, guys, what we learned from this video is that we we, n- we learn what's the file name extension for VBA, and then we get to know what Excel VBA Editor is, and then how to use VBA module. We also create sub procedure, and then we also learn how to declare variables. We also initialize variables using set keywords, and we also use different data types like worksheet. We also use string and integer, and then we know or we learn how to get the last row with value of a worksheet specific column, and then we also learn how to use immediate window. Then we also use for loop and an if condition, and then we also include VBA message box, and again how to run your code using an Excel shape as a button. Alright, so if you have any question on this video, please put that in the description and I will do my best to answer as soon as possible. So I think that's all for this for now, and see you to the next one.